Hello everyone, magandang hapon Philippines and xin chào Vietnam. My name is Jamie from Move Up and I am back again as your host for HR What's Next. Wow, I can't believe that we are now on episode number 10 of our HR webinar series. So thank you everyone who's been with us from the start. Thank you for anyone who's joining us for the first time. Speaking of which, if you're joining us for the first time, this isn't a one-time event, as I mentioned before. We are now on episode number 10. So we are here every Tuesday from 2 p.m. Vietnam time or 3 p.m. Philippines time. All right. So we have got a super topic for today's session. I guess now most of us are familiar with working remotely. And indeed, most of us are now working remotely, and that's probably going to be a trend going into the future. So this has many advantages, of course, but presents its own unique challenges as well. Namely, how exactly can we engage our employees when they're working remotely? And to answer this question, we have an extra special guest today, Mr. Steve Jones, the Chief Operating Officer, COO, sorry, of Dreamplex here in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. And Steve is going to be sharing some tips, tools, and tricks on how exactly we can engage our employees remotely. I'm really looking forward to today's session. Please do be writing your comments, writing your questions in the comments section. We can see all your comments live. Before we go on, just a few quick shout outs to some of our partners here watching today. We have Sir Marvin. Thank you, Sir Marvin, for watching today. Thank you to Ms. Rona, our partners from Uprush. Thank you to Sir Darwin and Ms. Nez from HR Calabrazon, who are all watching today. We're all really excited. All right. Before we move on, I'd like to give you a quick message from our co-organizer, Praxis Associates Philippines. So Praxis are able to help if you are looking for a virtual events consultant. So whether you are looking for help with your virtual conferences or virtual meetings, or even maybe you want to create a webinar series like our one, please do get in touch with Praxis. They will give you a free consultation if you reach out to them on info@praxis.ph, or you can also reach out to them on their social media pages. So check out Praxis for some more information on that one. Also, next, I'd like to give a huge thank you to our partners for helping us put on this webinar series. So let's start with HR Calabrazon. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Nez, HR Calabrazon. We have ASEAN Leaders HR Circle. Thank you, Sir Marvin, Marketing in Vietnam. Thank you to WACOSEP, HR Tech Asia, to Working Mom, Learning Synergies. Of course, we have Jump Digital. Thank you to Fixer, and thank you to the Society for the Advancement of HR in the Philippines. Also, we have our co-organizers for this event, HR What's Next, co-presented by Move Up, Praxis Associates Philippines. So thank you to the Move Up and Praxis teams. Thank you to Uprush, Ms. Rona, and also to Jandy, our co-organizer for this event. All right, so thank you so much for our partners. Next up, I'm not doing this all myself, so I have my correspondents who will be helping me with today's session. So first up, my name is Jamie. I'm going to be the moderator for today's session. And I have an announcement. We have a prize available for today, okay? Like always. So the prize is worth 25,000 pesos. There will be one winner. And this will give you access to our exclusive library of master course content exclusively available in the Move Up app. So again, this is worth 25,000 pesos. So be sure to listen for the question later in the program. More on that later. We are also extending our promo for Teachers Month all the way through to the end of this series. So if you're not lucky enough to be the winner for today's session, you can claim full access to our masterclasses for only 500 pesos. So if you would like to avail this, head to prx.ph/. teachers promo. That's prx.ph/teachers promo. Okay, I think that's quite enough talking for me. I have only one correspondent today to help me, Mr. Francis. So Francis, take it away.
Hello, Jamie. Hello, Steve. Good afternoon. Okay. I'm really excited to talk to you for your talk. But before I get to the details, I am Francis, the tech manager for Praxis Associates and PH. And first, I'd like to show you what we do in Praxis. There, we are currently live on different Facebook pages and groups. If you have any questions for our speakers, just type them in the comment section down below. Thanks, and I hope we will have a fruitful learning session today. And before I go back to monitoring your comments, let's watch this video to see why remote teams all around Asia are using Jandy.
Okay, so before we start, a couple more shoutouts. We have wow, we have a star-studded comment section today. We've got Miss Mai Vaugh. Hi, Miss Mai. Thank you for watching again. We also have Mr. Dan Van Rossum, the CXO of Dreamplex. Mr. Dan is joining us today. I've seen we even have some viewers today from LinkedIn. All right, we have Miss Tao on LinkedIn. Thank you for watching today. We have Mr. David as well, also watching from LinkedIn. So thanks for joining today's session. We can see all your comments. So please write any comments, any questions in the comment section on Facebook or on LinkedIn. All right. So let's go into the most important part of today's session, which is, of course, our keynote speech. So to give you a bit of background, Steve is, well, he's one of the most well-renowned operations experts here in Vietnam, especially for HR and recruitment businesses. Steve has co-created several successful HR systems, including one of Vietnam's most successful recruitment platforms, Vietnam Works, where he was the COO for the mother company, Navigos Group. Now, Steve is currently the COO of Dreamplex Vietnam. And without any further ado, here to talk about tips, tools, and tricks to engage your employees remotely, it's Mr. Steve Jones.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for supporting the webinar series. As Jamie mentioned, my name is Steve Jones. I am the Chief Operating Officer of Dreamplex. In this video, I'm going to give you some tools, tips, and tricks to engage your remote workforce. Specifically, we'll talk a little bit about establishing basic ground rules for your remote workers. But more importantly, we want to talk about ways to improve the social interaction between remote workers when they're not physically in front of someone to read nonverbal communication cues and things like that. So I hope you learn on this episode. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the things that we're doing or things that member companies that we know of here at Dreamplex are doing in order to engage the remote workforce. So after you sort out the logistics, of working remotely, you have to spend some time to invest in the culture around working virtually. It's really this virtual culture that we want to set, that we want to create, that'll help set your team up for success. Now, remote working can be difficult because it can be lonely. People can feel disconnected at times. And it's very frustrating sometimes when people cannot see when teammates need help, when they don't feel well, or even if they are working or not working. Oftentimes, you wonder about that. So we're going to talk about these things and how we can keep your team from becoming disconnected, lonely, and find ways to keep them engaged and productive. So I'm going to talk about 9 tips today. But first of all, when we go through these, feel free to enter questions into the chat, and we'll try to address those as we go along. So the first thing, and I think most people already do this, they establish clear ground rules, for the remote workers, okay? It can be challenging to set boundaries when being in the office or being at your desk is no longer a signal that says, hey, I'm ready to work or I'm ready to talk. You don't have that visual cue when you're working remotely. So it's really important to set clear expectations for all your team members vis-a-vis availability during business hours and communication after hours. So you want to make sure that you do have ground rules for people working at home so that they can have a family life as well as to do the business that you're expecting from them. And so while we have lots of tools out there in terms of messaging and real-time collaboration tools, you need to make sure you spend some time thinking about how you define proper etiquette for using them and the hours and the response times that you want people to have both during the workday and outside of the workday. So it's really important with these tools when you're establishing, rules for when people are working is to utilize, the status is a good way to do it, to signal availability or lack thereof. And many of these, collaboration tools have, predetermined codes. But one thing I'd really encourage people to do is when you establish these ground rules specifically for your company, is set up custom codes that do more than just say do not disturb or out of the office or in a meeting, because that is a very generic status. You may want to incorporate statuses such as heads down working, concentrating, which says that you're preferring not to call or you're not going to respond to messages because you have to focus on the task at hand. These are all things that if you were sitting in the office, you could see and you could do, and people would know how to react. But when you're working remotely, you don't have a clear vision or a clear visibility about the people. And so having statuses that talk more about what that person is doing can be extremely helpful. And it's some of these ground rules that could really make a difference in terms of people being able to collaborate remotely. The second thing is that after you set ground rules for the company in terms of, how do you want to operate remotely, the next thing is that, how are you going to deal with the individuals? Okay, not being able to read a team member's reaction or walk over their desk and get a response or not see how they're feeling or what they're doing can result in friction, delays. It can result in just general misunderstandings in terms of employees when they're trying to work together. So one of the things is write an employee user manual or a user guide for each employee. And so ask your colleagues to share what their work preferences are. And so basically what we want to do in this situation is build a profile for every employee that gets posted somewhere that they can look at that states how they want to work, how they want to communicate, and how do you want to get feedback? Because you're no longer face-to-face on this. And so some of the things that you take for granted because you just know when you see an employee, you no longer have that ability to do it. So explaining and posting how you want to work and how you want to communicate is very important in terms of how you're going to interact easily with your remote colleagues. And so an example, just taking me, this is, how I prefer to work when I work remotely. I prefer email. I don't prefer, direct messaging apps. Talk about, how quickly you'll respond, from your different contact channels, and knowing that if you can't get a hold of me, how to get a hold of me in an emergency. Also talking about things in terms of how do I want to learn information? How do I want you to connect with me? When are meetings better for me? When should you talk to me? Please don't talk to me before I have at least 2 cups of coffee. I just don't, I'm just not happy. And then also, how do I want to deal with feedback and information? Because working remotely, it's very difficult to see people and read emotions and read the way that they look. So you have to understand how they want to receive, either praise, how they want to receive feedback, whether it's good, bad, indifferent, and when they want it, because you don't always have that ability to read that, from the person being in front of you. So you want to really take the time to really have each individual determine how do they want to be connected with as they're working remotely. The third thing is now that you've defined, how's the company going to work, you've also identified how people want to be connected with remotely, the next thing is what I call the daily double. And no, it's not necessarily winning $3 or winning the lottery, but it's really on a daily basis, now that you have information about the company and the people, is that how are you going to react that day? So sending out and placing a status for people in terms of how ready are they ready to communicate with people each day? Are they happy? Are they sad? Are they angry? What is your energy level? How much energy do you feel today to communicate, to collaborate with your colleagues? That's very important when you're working remotely. Again, because you're not face-to-face, you can't see this every time. And so these 2 questions help you to interact, engage with somebody when you can't see, feel, or hear them. At the office, of course, you can feel their mood, you can listen to their emotional state. When you're remote, you're essentially deaf, dumb, and blind when it comes to people. You're talking through oftentimes the written word, and because you can see none of this, you can't necessarily react appropriately. And this often, leads to miscommunications and awkward social interactions that probably wouldn't happen if you could actually see the person, which you don't always able to do remotely. So that leads to the next, tip is that you definitely want to monitor your team's well-being and how they're feeling. When you're working remotely, you're often by yourself. You don't have that connectivity, and not sitting next to each other means not seeing when a team member isn't doing well or might need help. And so I think it's really important that you poll your team members frequently and ask questions that are most important to them about what they're doing in their work and how it's affecting them. And so one of the things that we use at Dreamplex is that we use Office Vibe, and we ask questions, in terms of engaging our employees to find out how they look, how they feel about what's going on in the health and happiness inside the organization. Now, while we do this, and we do have people that work on site, we do have a number of people, and we do allow our people to, work at our different locations, as well as work from home, work from coffee shop. And so we don't always see everybody every day, but it's important that we take the pulse of how our team members are feeling, so that we can get an idea of how engaged they are. And so I would highly recommend that if you are working remotely and do have people working remotely, that you check in with them frequently in order to see and make sure that the company is delivering on the values and what they need in order to get the job done. In lockstep with us reaching out, to the employee and making sure that they have, ways of responding to us, and making sure that they are feeling good and can have a good feeling that we're looking through and making sure that we're taking care of them, is that we have to provide them multiple ways to give us feedback. It can't be just one way. And so being remote really makes it hard to express challenges and frustrations, because you're alone. You don't have a way to discuss these necessarily with your colleagues. You have a way of having this natural outlet, which if it continues unknown and can continue to fester, it leads to real problems in terms of working, with your colleagues. And so providing multiple ways for feedback, whether it's an open forum at a company meeting, or a forum where questions can be raised anonymously, having an anonymous feedback where you have real-time responses is a great way to head off a lot of these things that these challenges and frustrations that might arise, because you don't have an easy way of talking directly with colleagues or management, because you are working remotely. The other thing is that when you are working remotely is encourage your colleagues to help each other. Okay, encourage them, without the subtle belonging cues, that create, the safety. Teammates can feel anxious about how they're doing and how things are going on. And what I mean by that is that, if you go 2 or 3 days without talking to somebody, and your last communication was not exactly rosy, you might be wondering, what are they saying about you? How are you feeling? What's going on? Am I not doing a good job? And so having colleagues consistently reach out to each other and communicate, encouragement, and making sure that they're always tuned in to each other is really, really important. It's almost, having a communication and encouragement, particularly for remote employees, you need to almost do that at an exponential factor over what you do face-to-face. Primarily because you do have these long periods where people might not be talking, or they might not have interaction with somebody else, and then they really wonder how they're doing and whether things are going well for them. And so, encouraging, positive feedback one-on-one between employees, encouraging feedback in public, where you tell employees and reward them for doing that. One of the things that our chief experience officer here at Dreamplex did was he implemented a new program called shout outs, to recognize people for great work. We publish this, we'll recognize people in, our actual team meetings, but we'll also publish it on Slack for everybody to see it, which then, further engages the employees, that we're seeking to motivate. Now, one of the real challenges with working remotely is that, group interactions of remote teams, are often limited to calls. And so it's really a set meeting, people are in a meeting, or they have to, have a status update or something like that. And that group interaction is a very formal, structured meeting. And it's really, doesn't, create something spontaneous where you need to create, real-time collaboration. So creating online spaces for real-time collaboration is important. So oftentimes creative collaboration and problem solving, they happen outside these scheduled meetings. They happen, in the cafeteria. They happen, randomly in collaboration spaces, or they just might happen around the water cooler. So how do you recreate these, these collaboration, spontaneous collaborations that occur when you're actually physically around somebody? And so one of the things is to, you should definitely set up virtual spaces, that are always on, where people can just come in and out as they please, which can be invaluable for, creating this collaboration. It doesn't have to be, done at a set time or anything like that, but you can create a marketing team collaboration space that's always on, that people can just tune into. Where they just want to ask a question, or maybe they just want to sit there and work and have somebody quietly sitting at the other end of the video. But it's these real-time collaborations that happen in the physical space that it would be important to try to recreate in the virtual space. So not only does it help to create that interconnectedness, to make sure that people feel that they're, working with someone, but it also creates that space where, hey, I want to bounce an idea off of a teammate to see if it makes sense, and move my project forward. So looking at ways to do that, whether you do it through a Google Hangout, whether you do it through some other, medium. Look at setting these up, around the different work groups, so that they do have this ability to have this real-time, spontaneous collaboration. The last one additional area, and it goes along with the idea for this real-time collaboration, is that, if you're in an office, you do have time to just have a casual interaction. You have the time to go to the cafeteria and just, sit down and have a coffee, or you have the, the ability to take a walk outside of the building where you would just get together and, talk with your coworkers. And so, casual interactions tend to disappear, when everybody is working remote, but really it's super essential to building relationships and strengthening bonds, within your business. So setting up, these virtual, hangout spaces that encourage these ad hoc gatherings, whether it's a virtual break room or a cafeteria where, everybody logs on at noon and has lunch together, or, does happy hour at 4 o'clock, just so that it's basically cross-function, cross-teams. It's as if you were at the office and you were just sitting down and trying to have a coffee in your canteen or your cafeteria. Those go a long way towards, helping to foster these interactions and keep people engaged when they aren't working in the same locations. The last tip is, host social gatherings and contests online. Social events, we all know, help to strengthen the bonds between team members. They allow for interactions across teams, particularly, when they don't, and these things are very difficult and don't readily translate in a remote workplace. And so you kind of have to create them. One of the tools that was brought to my attention, particularly during COVID, was an app called House Party. It's basically a social media, gathering place that you can kind of just hang out with friends. But the interesting thing about it is that it also has a game and contest aspect to it, so that you can basically, create a way to learn and enjoy the company of your colleagues, within games and contests, so that it makes it a little bit structured, but not so structured that you would want to, not attend. But you could even go as far as, having your first social gathering and have the team members decide on what are the contests or what are the things that we're going to do for, the next gathering, and kind of start to build those relationships. or continue to build on those relationships if you are moving from being in an office to this more, remote work type setting. So when we talk about engagement, these are the 9 tips, that we talk about, and it's trying to use them, all together. Is one more important than the other? No, you don't have to use all of them. Some of these might not work for, your team or your company. You may have, different levels and aspects of remote working. You may not be 100% remote where you would need everything here. There are some that just may not work for you, but the key with engaging with remote workers, and the one thing that, I've taken away primarily, through COVID and the things is that the need for consistent, constant feedback, more so than when you're in the office, because you can't see, feel, touch, and hear the people that you work with. Remember, many of the physical, emotional, and nonverbal cues are not available to you when you work remotely, and so you need to replace them with more feedback and over-communicate in many instances to address this shortfall. And so the key thing is that it's learning how to communicate and how your teammates want to be communicated with, and how you want to make sure that you put things in place that allow your team to react remotely in as many ways as they would as if they were sitting right in front of each other. And so it's really spending time to really think through how your teams are going to be able to collaborate and how you can recreate as much of what you can do physically in the office in an online space. So thank you for watching, and please, continue to support this webinar series, and look forward to speaking with you again.
Wow, Steve, thank you so much. That was one of my favorites that we've done so far this series.
Thanks.
Because you know what, Steve, often when you have a webinar, there's a lot of good theory, right? But what I think is, what can I actually go away and do? But in your presentation, it's all stuff I can go away and do today, right?
Thank you.
So yeah, no, it's great, fantastic, and I think it can be applied to anybody who's working remotely. If anything, it's given me a bit of a kick to make me hurry up with organizing our virtual quiz night for our team. So, Steve,
Okay.
I'll be inviting you back in just a moment for the Q&A/panel discussion. So I'll see you in just a second, Steve. All right.
Thanks.
So everyone watching, you're probably wondering, can I get a certificate for today's session? Yes, you can. So the recording for this session will be available in the Move Up app. We're creating a course called Tips, Tools, and Tricks to Engage Your Employees Remotely, exactly like how Steve presented. To be able to claim the certificate, however, you must pass the post-quiz tests, all right? So listen very carefully so you can answer the quiz correctly, all right? Now, next up, I'd like to give you a bit more information about what exactly is Move Up. I keep talking about Move Up, Move Up. Okay, let me tell you a little bit more about Move Up. Let's go to the next slide, guys. There we go. So if you're looking for someone to help deliver your learning and development program, then you can reach out to us. We will consult on your L&D program and help you to adapt for the I hate this word, the new normal of the 2020s. We also have exclusive master course content, which we're billing as essential skills for the 2020s. And within the Move Up app, we have, of course, performance, recognition, and rewards. If that's not enough, our off-the-shelf solutions, we can also create for you your own app or websites. If you'd like to know a little bit more about what we do, you can reach out to me on jamie@upupapp.asia. And you're probably thinking, what is Move Up? Well, you can watch this video to find out. Okay, couple of announcements before we proceed. We have over 18 private watch parties going on HR groups across Facebook. So hi everybody watching from the different watch parties. Also, another update, LinkedIn has finally approved our broadcasting request. Okay, so shout out to everyone watching on LinkedIn. This is our first ever LinkedIn live broadcast, first of many to come. Okay, so I'd like to give another thank you to all our partners and an extra special thank you to our co-organizer for this event, Uprush, who have launched their first ever online HR bootcamp. Watch this video to find out some more info on Uprush. Okay, remember I told you at the start, we do have a prize available for today's session. Just a reminder, guys, do not go anywhere. We still have the Q&A section, and we still have the prize to win. So I will be asking you the question that you need to answer to win the prize after the Q&A section. Just as a reminder, this prize is worth 25,000 pesos. Today, you will get it for free, or one lucky person will get it for free. If you'd like some more info on our promo as well, which we have extended into this month, you can head to prx.ph/teachers promo. So even if you don't win, you can get it for only 500 pesos. So there you go. All right. So let's move on to the panel discussion Q&A segment. I'd like to invite back Mr. Steve. Hello, Steve.
Hello.
So I know I have lots of questions for you. First, if I may start off the Q&A section.
Okay.
Everyone else watching on social media, on Facebook, LinkedIn, please write your comments and questions now, and I will ask them to Steve. So I will kick things off. Right, I have a question here. So are there any differences, Steve, that you saw in terms of programs or activities that work better for certain departments? For example, like say sales or tech, or is it pretty same across the board?
Well, I mean, it's not going to be the same across the board because each function has, different requirements in terms of, whether they have, when they have to be available. Somebody that's customer oriented has a much, stricter time guideline than somebody that's potentially doing software development. And so you have to really tailor it to, each, specific function and what's required of it. The key is that, you want to be flexible and you want to make sure that you still, maintain the ability for them to interact and to communicate and to collaborate with people, but how it's done might be slightly different, due to the requirements of their work. Somebody that has to answer the phones on customer service, is going to have one set of requirements versus somebody that's going to have that might be, doing marketing or might be doing, development work where it's basically heads down and you could, do that at any time.
Got you. So I have a question coming in from the audience from Oliver. Now, I swear I didn't plant this question, Steve. It says, how would you react, respond, or deal with a boss who is not sensitive, mostly neglecting the well-being of their employees? Like, give me, do this, do that. I want this done. What's your strategy for that kind of boss?
Find a new boss. Yeah, I mean, we all have those, those type of. We've all probably had those type of bosses, in the past. It's hard to go to those bosses and have a conversation because yes, they sometimes really don't care. But I think it would be important in that situation is that you do talk to other people within the organization, to address that, whether it's going to your HR. Most organizations do have a policy for addressing that. So go to HR, discuss the challenges that you're having with the boss there. Have HR drive a lot of these well-being programs because they typically have a mandate to do that, which would then encourage the line managers to do that. And then if that doesn't work, work through the HR and then go up in the organization, to have it addressed. Because if the organization doesn't address it as a whole, it's just going to make, the overall well-being of the organization in general that much worse. So there are avenues to do it. I know that a lot of times they're not comfortable, but trying to engage and have other employees work with you, work with the HR, and then work with other managers to address it is one way to see if there's a way to cause positive change. Do it in a way where you're trying to co-opt the person and do it in a positive way. It doesn't always work. Sometimes it does. Many times it doesn't. But that would be my recommendation.
Quick shout out to Paul who is watching. He's commented, "Are you two talking about me?" No, of course not, Paul. Okay, so Steve, you talked about developing and managing remote work culture. Do I need to appoint a resource person to develop and manage this? And if I do, who should that be?
I think it really depends upon the organization and the continuum that you have in terms of remote. If you're 100% remote and everybody works remotely, then yeah, you probably want to have somebody focused on it, to really focus on building that culture. It's really the interactions and trying to basically recreate online what you do physically. And that's not always easy. And it does take somebody, to spend some time to do that. And oftentimes you end up leading more events, and having, somebody to do that is important. But if your HR is shifting that way, then that could be the HR department. But if you're somewhere in the middle, you still may want to have somebody, focused on it, because what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to combine what you do, on site with what you do with your remote workers. And so taking the time to really think through how are you going to merge those interactions and so forth. So I do think that you do need to have somebody that's specifically focused on creating that culture and how you're going to inculcate it and push it through your organization, whether it's an experience officer, whether it's your, employee, or chief people officer. You do have to have that from the top down, and you have to push that all the way through, because really, it's those interactions, that engage employees that make them more productive and really, drive an organization forward.
For sure. And I mean, it is more challenging as well to do a lot of these things remotely. So I agree with you that it would really, really help to have someone that is actually nurturing that culture, because it's not going to grow on its own, right, Steve?
Right.
It
won't.
Excellent. We have a question here from Miss Ellen Gonzalez. She says, "Hi, Sir Steve. Good afternoon." Very polite in the Philippines, they are, Steve. what kind of activities and contests can you suggest in times of pandemic? We have to keep our people engaged as much as possible. To give some context, Steve, Philippines is still in full lockdown. They're not as lucky
Yeah.
as we are in Vietnam. So what would be your
Yeah.
suggestion for Miss Ellen?
Well, I remember one of the interesting things came from a company that's run by a friend of mine, where they, were doing contests where they actually had the employees come up with the contests. And one of the contests is that they had to do a couple-minute video in terms of how to make hot chocolate and their own recipe for hot chocolate. I mean, it sounds completely silly and stupid, but literally they had 80% of the people in the company figure out the best way and all the different recipes to do hot chocolate. So I think there's not necessarily one activity. I think it's reaching out to your employees. They're creative enough that they can come up with things that would be just, a little bit off the wall, that would just be fun to do. So I think you have to, do something like that, get the employees to come up with it. But I also think that, you can come up with contests, but I think it's also important that when you're in complete lockdown is to, have as many meetings weekly or bi-weekly, make sure that people know what's going on in the company, make sure that they understand what's happening from that standpoint. But I think that the activities in the contest should be generated by the people within the company, because that will then help to create that sense of belonging, because they have a vested interest in doing it. So that's what I would recommend, is doing it organically that way, even if you have to prod it and come up with a couple of them on your own to begin with.
Super. So our next question is, it actually touches more a bit on performance rather than engagement. So we have a question from Jerome David, is asking, what are the possible things to do to make your employees work seriously, compared to ones that are not performing well? So I guess, how can you manage performance is the kind of overall umbrella question.
Well, I mean, that's one of the big challenges of working remotely. I mean, I know particularly here in Vietnam, you're so, everybody, tends to manage performance by, are you at your desk? Are you working from, 8 to 6? And did you use your thumb to check in on your biometric to make sure that you're here? So they tend to manage performance that way. But really, when you're working remotely, you really need to have some very clear, objectives and clear results that you're expecting. And making sure that you set those, whether you set them monthly or quarterly, but you set them and they're very clear. They're things that can easily be measured, and there are things that, have a clear result associated with them. And what you do is that you check in weekly with your team members to make sure that you're on track for achieving them. And so you have to really focus more on what is the result and what's the objective that I want done, versus, relying on your site and looking and making sure that somebody's at the office and that they're working. You don't have the ability to do that. So it becomes very, very important that you have clearly defined objectives, clearly defined results, and making sure that you're monitoring those, because you can no longer monitor whether or not the person's there or working. It's really the result that you can only see. And so that's, the way that you have to do it. And it'll become very apparent on people that don't perform well, because they will not achieve those objectives and results, because they're very, very well defined. And so it's easy to measure from that standpoint. You just have to get comfortable with the fact that you have to rely on those data and those metrics, to manage the people, and that you have to, you're no longer managing with your eyes, you're managing with the results that they're doing, and you have to get comfortable with it. And so oftentimes it's not the employee that has the issue. Oftentimes it's us as managers,
100%.
getting comfortable managing from an objective, key result, and data-driven manner with the employee.
Yeah. So we really need to shift away from just looking at your 9 to 5, the hours that you put in, right? And more actually, what are you supposed to achieve in that hours that you're working? It doesn't matter essentially if the employee is working 9 to 5 or 10 to 6 or whichever way they're managing their time remotely. It's about, are they actually doing the objectives of their role, right, Steve?
No, that's exactly right. I mean, the example that I always give is, with salespeople. Okay, so a salesperson hits their numbers by the middle of the month, and they want to take the rest of the month off. Do you really care? Well, no. They hit their objective. So, be comfortable with the fact that people achieve their objectives. If they don't achieve their objectives, then you have to take action. But really, it's focusing more on, what are the results that are coming versus trying to look at, is somebody there? Is somebody working? Well, if they are, they should have the result. You don't have to necessarily see it, and you have to get comfortable with that.
Agreed. Do you think remote working is a trend that's going to continue more into the future, even in places like markets like Vietnam, where we've been very lucky, and a lot of things are going back to normal operation? Are you seeing companies are still implementing remote working, or are they trying to shift backwards a little bit?
Well, I still see them doing. I still see them, shifting towards remote working. I think companies are changing. They are moving away from being real estate based and necessarily having everybody in the office. Do I think that they'll move so far as some of the Silicon Valley firms where everybody's working remotely until the end of 2022 or something like that? I think the pendulum will swing back a little bit, but I think there is going to be a trend towards remote work and people working, remotely, but then also coming into the office, also coming into office hubs to collaborate with other people, to work with other people, to do those things that you can't do when you're on your own. So I don't see people coming in and necessarily having a desk somewhere. They may come in and have meetings or work at a communal table like they do at a coffee shop, or things like that are activity based, that will move in that direction. And so everything that we're talking about for remote work can be applied in this situation. And this is where a little bit of the hybrid, section comes in. You might have, instead of necessarily having to have always online collaboration, like we had talked about for remote working, you might work remotely at home, but then you might 2 days a week go into a place where you'll collaborate with somebody else. And so we at Dreamplex see a continuum in terms of how companies are adjusting, in that they want to move out of commercial real estate. They're trying to reduce their exposure there, but they're also trying to take into account how their employees are starting to work, post-COVID, in terms of being able to have this flexibility to work where and when you want, but then also having the ability to come together and collaborate, with their colleagues to achieve what they want to achieve.
Yeah, I actually saw some data. I think it might have been posted by Dan on LinkedIn about the reasons why people actually went to office, and a lot of them are
Right.
social reasons, collaborative reasons. So I agree.
Exactly.
I think having a collaboration space as an option is for sure definitely a good thing. So I hope to see more companies adopting this hybrid approach.
Yeah, I think we will. So, and the work that Don's done in terms of that area, I mean, he's done a lot in it. And so, if people definitely should take a look at that and look at some of that, because it'd be very helpful in terms of, being able to really focus on what do your employees want, what do your employees need in order to be successful in, today's changing environment.
So I'd like to ask a little bit about conflict resolution, because you don't always, because you're no longer physically present in the office, you don't always see the happenings and what's going on. So, and of course, conflicts are still going to happen, right, Steve? So how do you address conflict in a remote work situation?
Well, I mean, the best way to address it is try to head it off at the beginning. So, by being able to, one, understand people's communication preferences. You know, how are they going to respond to you? When are they going to respond to you? For instance, me, I mean, I'm terrible when it comes to instant messaging, and I don't respond in 5 minutes. I typically respond within an hour because I'm either in a meeting or do something. But if I didn't respond right away, or people don't know what my communication preferences is, they might get mad. Hey, he's not responding. He's not, doing this. And so a lot of it tends to be to the fact that they don't know. It's fear of the unknown. So even though I don't work remotely with a lot of my current staff, we work together, I still tell them, if you write me on email, I'll get back to you within 4 hours. If you're on instant message, it's within an hour. If you talk to me before 9 o'clock and I've had my 2 cups of coffee, I'm going to be grumpy. By telling people this, it helps to head that off. Okay. The second thing is that, by having, online collaboration, having this always on and this ability to just jump in and jump out with people will help to, also reduce that anxiety of not knowing what's going on or not knowing how people are reacting. And so again, it's trying to recreate those things. But if conflict does happen, you still handle it remotely the same way you would as if you were handling it, person to person. In person, is you would want to sit down, you would want to get online if you can't meet them physically, and you would want to have a very direct, respectful, conversation in terms of, hey, this is what's happened, explain these things, explain why you feel the way you do, and resolve it the same way you would if you were actually sitting face to face. But so many of the conflicts that arise from remote workers tends to be around this fear of the unknown, in that you don't know how people are thinking, reacting, feeling, responding. And so I think it is really important to, while it may seem stupid to write down, hey, I'm going to respond to an email in an hour, it really does go a long way to for people to know how they're going to react. I mean, I tell people that if you CC me on an email, I'm not going to answer because, I tend to read my CC'd emails once a day. I tell people, if you CC me on an email, I read it once a day. If you're asking me to do an action, write the email to me. So I do this from the standpoint is I'm telling people what to expect from me so that we can work together. And I think that while it seems stupid, and a lot of people are going, well, that's just, that just seems normal, but when you're working remotely, you don't necessarily know that. So actually writing it down goes a long way to really eliminating that potential conflict of, hey, they're not responding, or they're mad at me, or, whatever, bad thought immediately enters your mind when there's a vacuum there. So I think the best way to do it is to be proactive, to avoid them by understanding why the conflicts arise when you work remotely. But if they do arise, handle them exactly the same way you would in person.
Yeah. So we should be more transparent about our habits so that our staffs know that you're not ignoring them on purpose, right?
Exactly. No, that's exactly right. And oftentimes that's what it gets. That's what people think.
Yeah, because when you're working remotely, of course, even text communications, there's so many non-verbal cues that you read from other people that don't translate into email and text, right? So you lose that human aspect. So that's a great tip to mitigate that, actually.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah.
So you talked about the managing remote work. Okay, so what would be the minimum tools that you need to manage remote work in the way you discussed? Are some better than others?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't. I'm not going to plug one tool or the other, but I mean, having a real-time collaboration platform, definitely helps, particularly if you just want to ping people. Email, of course, and some sort of file sharing is important so that you can, collaborate on work. But then, making sure that you have a video platform, that allows you to see to see and connect. So if you have those three sets of tools, they can be really any tool. There's a number of them out there that can do it. But the one thing that you want to do is when you do have those tools, definitely build guidelines and policies around how you're going to use them and how you want people to interact virtually. So if you are going to have always on, collaboration for different, teams, or having a cafeteria, or water cooler for anybody to join in, make sure that you know the times, the, kind of the ground rules for using them for what they are, so that you get the most out of them. So I hate the word policy, so let's call it a guideline, but have guidelines in terms of how you want to use these tools. Mm-hmm. Just putting them out there isn't going to necessarily make them useful. They will help, but having a very structured look at how you want to virtually connect and interact, and the framework that you want to do it is just as important as the tools.
For sure. All right. I think if I could ask you one more question, Steve, and then maybe we'll get you to share your final advice for everyone that's watching today. So I'm trying to select one from here. Let's go for, let's talk about work from home parents, Steve. So for parents, how do you think the current setup has impacted working parents, and is there any particular tricks that they can use when working from home? Because I know a lot of you are parents.
When you said work appearance, meaning what you look like?
No. Sorry. What are your tips for parents working from home?
Oh, parents working from home. Parents working from home. The biggest challenge for parents working from home is that if they have kids in the house, so not only do you need to make sure that you set time aside and that these are office hours, but I would definitely, sit down with your family, particularly your kids, and sit down and say, look, yes, I'm at home, but, from 8 to noon, I'm working. You can't bother me. From 1 to 5, I'm working. You can't bother me. I'll come out at lunch. Set specific ground rules. And if you have the ability, try to move yourself, to the farther, away from where they are on a day-to-day basis. But really, it's sitting down and saying and creating those ground rules, like, the company is creating ground rules that's saying, look, we expect people to be available from 9 to 5 or 8 to 6 or whatever the time frame is, and saying the same thing to your kids, and making sure that they respect that. That would be my advice. I mean, fortunately for me, my oldest daughter's out of the house, and my youngest daughter, is a baby, so I don't have to worry about them walking in on me at this point. But but I think laying out some very specific ground rules, which is basically taking what the company has agreed on. You need to be available between these hours. You need to be working between these hours, and then just turning those ground rules around and saying to the family, yes, I'm working at home, but I'm at work, and between 9 and 5, I can't be bothered.
Got you. So before I ask you to share your final advice, thank you so much for spending your time today and allowing me to pick your brains today and answering so many questions. If anyone watching would like to reach out to you and ask some further advice, how can they reach out to you, Steve?
Yeah, they can just reach out to me at steve@dreamplex.co. Feel free to email me anytime. I'm happy to help any way that I can. And so, my final thought with working remotely is that these tips can help you, but I mean, I think that as long as you put yourself into the spot of how can I recreate online what I have offline, or somehow address those same challenges, you'll be able to come up with things that will, foster the ability to work remotely. So there's really not one way to do it. It's just that try to figure out and think through all of those cultural and all of those relationship things that are physical cues, mental cues, emotional cues that you can see and do in the office, and realize that you don't have them online, and just look for ways that you can either replace them or recreate them in a different manner that will allow you to continue to interact in a very positive way with your colleagues.
All right, Steve. So I think everyone watching, whether you're on Facebook, on LinkedIn, please join me in writing your thanks to Steve in the comment section. Okay, so thank you to Steve. Thank you to everybody watching. All right, but don't go anywhere. We still have our prize to win for today. All right, so let's go to the prize draw. Okay, so to win the prize for today's session. Oh wait, before the prize, a couple of announcements. Sorry, a couple of announcements. If that's not enough, we have another webinar series which is launching tomorrow, starting tomorrow, named Marketing What's Next. We're going to be sharing all the best practices for the marketing industry. What is the future of marketing, essentially? So please join us next week. Just a quick summary, here are the events that we have for November. Coming up tomorrow, we have the 30-day social media plan. Next week, we have Mr. Wes Jackson talking about mastering the art of personal branding. And then we have the story of a youth-focused brand by Rafid Chaudhry. So lots and lots of events coming up. Okay, now I think it's time for the prize draw. Yes, I'm correct. Okay, so the first person to write the correct answer will win exclusive access to our master courses. And all you need to do is answer me this question. What is the name of the app where you will access the master courses? Easy question, guys. What is the name of the app where you will access these master courses? Just while I'm waiting for the answer to come in, we have some topics like productivity for... Oh, we have a winner. So congratulations to Miss Ellen. Congratulations. One of our correspondents will reach out to you on social media and connect you with myself. And I will give you some details about how to claim your prize. We will be launching the masterclasses within this month. So congratulations to Miss Ellen. All right. Okay, so next up, you will be able to claim a certificate for today's session. All right, here are the instructions to do so. First of all, you'll need to download the Move Up app. Okay, you can head to moveup.page.link/get-app. If you have any problems with that, you can reach out to us on social media. There's some instructions on the screen now, but I think it'll be easier for you if we just play this video. So watch this video to find out how to claim your certificate.
Thank you for learning with us. Here are the steps to claim your certificates. Step 1. Go to Google Play Store if you are using an Android device, or you can go to Apple App Store if you're using an iPhone. There, you can download Move Up app. Step 2. Head to the Browse tab and select Channels to see all the channels available on Move Up. Choose the channel you want to subscribe to and click the subscribe button to access all the courses in the channel. Step 3. Access your My Learning tab to see all the channels that you have subscribed to. Inside the channel, you can select the course and click Begin. You will have a short pre-quiz to check your prior knowledge. Don't worry if you don't pass. Step 4. After key lessons, You will have the opportunity to answer the questions again. Make sure to answer carefully. You must score over 70% to be eligible for a certificate. Once all the lessons are completed, and if you have scored over 70% in the post-lesson tests, a button will appear to generate your certificate. If you have any difficulties, please contact us through our social media pages or email us at admin@upapp.asia. Thank you for moving up with us.
Okay, that is the end of our program. So I'd like to give a huge thank you to Mr. Steve Jones for joining us today and sharing some of his expertise. And the biggest thank you, of course, goes to you guys watching on Facebook, on LinkedIn. You are the people who make this series possible. So massive, massive thank you to everyone for watching and supporting this series. I've been Jamie. This has been HR What's Next. Thank you for moving up with us.